Today, more than 60 South African companies operate in Kenya, in the banking sector, in insurance, retail, manufacturing, telecommunication, infrastructure, and some of them in real estate. South Africa remains among the leading sources of foreign direct investment in Kenya, even as Kenyan enterprises increasingly venture south in search of new markets and partnerships. In 2025, bilateral trade between our two countries reached approximately $680 million. This is meaningful progress, but it is also a measure of how much potential remains untapped. Kenya supplies tea, coffee, horticulture, cut flowers, and some manufactured goods, while South Africa supplies machinery, vehicles, pharmaceuticals, steel, and industrial inputs. Such complementarity is the very foundation for a deeper industrial cooperation and shared value chains. Ladies and gentlemen, the Africa Continental Free Trade Area is among the greatest economic opportunities of our generation. The platform that will turn fragmented markets into a single competitive bloc capable of industrializing our economies, attracting investment, and creating jobs. Listening to the private sector actors break down what is going on at the East African community, what is going on at SADEC, what is going on in COMESA, and the coming together of the three blocs through the tripartite agreement, which came into force. But now we need greater implementation, acceleration actually, of implementation. We have offered to host the headquarters in Kenya of the TFTA so that we can provide momentum and provide the ecosystem for the integration of our markets so that we can unlock this huge potential of 800 million people market. And we build, of course, into the bigger market of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. Yet, intra-Africa trade remains far below global average. We've been given numbers here. Intra-Asian trade is at close to 60. Intra-European trade is close to 70. Intra-African trade is at 17. The region that has progressed the most in intra-regional trade is the East African community. But we're still way below where we should be. In other words, what the numbers tell us is we are struggling looking for markets very far from our continent, when actually the market in our continent is virgin. But the intra-Africa trade deficit remains far below the global average, as I have said, and that is precisely why partnerships such as ours between Kenya and South Africa matters. Transformation begins right there. Together, our two nations command the financial strength, industrial capacity, entrepreneurial talent, and innovation ecosystem to power not just intra-Africa trade, but the transformation of our continent. We must move beyond conventional trade and deliberately build integrated regional value chains in manufacturing, agriculture, mining, logistics, pharmaceuticals, energy, digital services, and green industrialization. Listening to the actors here earlier, we seem to be speaking in compartments. We must make what happens in South Africa stimulate what happens in Kenya, and vice versa. And policymakers, President Ramaphosa and myself, can do so much. But where the rubber meets the road is at the business level. You are the people who can move numbers. You are the people who can move figures. Changing these figures requires the private sector. And that is why on a state visit like this, it doesn't end with government. We have made it deliberate and intentional that after we have signed all the MOUs, we have agreed on all the policy frameworks, the private sector must be the engine that brings the MOUs, the policies into reality. And I want to say I commend the steady cooperation under our Joint Commission for Cooperation and Joint Trade Committee, which remain vital platforms for resolving trade matters and advancing our shared agenda. We must now ensure full implementation of their outcome so that businesses and investors feel tangible benefits. Today's discussions reveal opportunity across every strategic sector. In manufacturing, Kenya's industrial parks, special economic zones, and export processing zones offer ready platforms for regional partnerships, serving African markets under the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. South Africa's strength in automotive production, pharmaceuticals, mining, chemicals, and steel complement Kenya's rise as a regional production and logistics hub. Let us collaborate boldly in the automotive assembly, mineral beneficiation, agro-processing, and green manufacturing. There are real and tangible opportunities there. In agriculture, our strengths are remarkably complementary. Kenya, a global leader in tea, horticulture, fresh produce, and dairy. South Africa, a master of food processing, logistics, and retail. This is complementary. Africa cannot keep spending billions in importing food while our own farmers and agro-industries stand ready to feed the continent. We must invest decisively in agro-processing, cold chain logistics, irrigation, packaging, and supply chains that connect African producers to African markets. Your Excellencies, Kenya and South Africa are also poised to shape Africa's digital future. Kenya leads the continent in fintech, mobile money, and digital financial inclusion, while South Africa hosts one of Africa's most sophisticated capital markets. Together, we can pioneer partnerships in artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, digital infrastructure, e-commerce, and cross-border payments. You already know that we have a Pan-African payment settlement system that can help business people across our continent not to be stuck with foreign exchange, challenges. That you can be paid in whatever currency, so long as our central banks are connected through the Pan-African payment system that is underwritten by Afreximbank. These are avenues that make trade, business, and enterprises move faster. Kenya is fast becoming a premier destination for global business services and business process outsourcing. With a young, educated, English-speaking workforce, competitive costs, robust digital infrastructure, and a time zoning bridging Europe, the Middle East, and Africa, Kenya is an ideal platform for scalable service delivery. I invite South African and multinational enterprises to make Kenya their regional global business service hub, uniting talent, technology, and market access under one competitive ecosystem. Infrastructure and connectivity remain central to unlocking intra-African trade. Kenya's port of Mombasa and the Lamu Port South Sudan-Ethiopia transport corridor link East Africa and Central Africa to global markets, while South Africa's world-class ports in Durban, Cape Town, Nkura, and Richards Bay anchor trade across the South. United, these corridors can strengthen East-South connectivity, expand intra-African trade under the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, and position both nations as logistics hubs for the continent. Closer cooperation in aviation, rail, warehousing, and cargo handling will sharpen the efficiency of trade across Africa. In this spirit, I commend the strategic partnership between Kenya Airways and South African Airways. Their success will not only connect our people, but also deepen trade, tourism, investment, and regional business integration. Governments can build enabling environment, set policy direction, and invest in infrastructure. But it is the private sector that drives transformation. Africa's future will be written by bold entrepreneurs, innovative firms, and strategic investors willing to back the continent's long-term promise. In a meeting we had in Nairobi, I think we made a very clear appeal to our private sector. Before we look for investors from Europe and America and Asia, the private sector in our continent must take the lead. Yes. You do not expect somebody from thousands upon thousands of kilometers to come to South Africa and appreciate and understand the nuances of what goes on here. It is you, the private sector here, who must take the lead, build alliance, build joint ventures, so that you can help us crowd in investments and bring others to invest in our region. And therefore, it is very important when we meet like this with President Ramaphosa here and myself, that the private sector takes advantage of this meeting so that we can unlock for you the challenges that you experience. And I would advise that it is easier when you have joint ventures in different countries, because that way you leverage on local knowledge, local understanding, and be able to move things a lot faster. And therefore I urge the business leaders before me here to convert the opportunity of this forum into concrete investments, joint ventures, and lasting commercial partnerships. I want to tell you that there are opportunities in Kenya, and I can put them down for you. This good man from Standard Bank spoke, for Kenya better than I could. Yeah. On what the opportunities are, on where the momentum is, and therefore it is very important as we build the infrastructure for the public. We want to make it a public-private partnership. I will give you maybe 2 or 3 examples. We now have a big program on transport and logistics. We're building a new airport. We're investing on a railway to connect Kenya to DRC. We have a big program on road infrastructure, about 28,000 kilometers of road and tarmac. And that is going to cost us anywhere between 10 and 15 billion dollars. These are opportunities. You know, whenever we have opportunities like this, we have Chinese companies and companies from elsewhere. Why not South African companies? We have partnerships. Some of the roads are toll roads. You know, these are investable pieces of infrastructure. You people must find the correct frameworks between the private sector here and the private sector in Kenya to take advantage of these opportunities. We have a program to generate an extra 10,000 megawatts of energy. We have a power purchase agreement. This is an opportunity for investment. South Africa has very deep financial pockets. You can invest some of that money in these pieces of infrastructure. We are very good farmers in South Africa. We are looking for opportunity to do another 2.5 million acres under irrigation. We are investing. We are looking for partners from South Africa to invest. And the paradox sometimes is the private sector is stuck with a lot of money. They don't know what to do with it. On the other side, we are stuck with a lot of public projects and we don't have the money to do them. Just imagine. There is a whole pool of money sitting somewhere. You're looking for opportunities to invest. We are also stuck with projects. We are looking for people to invest. That nexus and connection, it is for you in the private sector to work with us. And that is why, for example, in Kenya, we have set up the National Infrastructure Fund that will now provide an opportunity for the private sector and the public sector to co-invest in projects that are commercially viable, even though they are public projects. These are opportunities for you to look at, and I welcome our good friends in South Africa. You are no longer strangers in Kenya, whether it is APSA, whether it is Stanbic. You people already have networks in Kenya, and we want to work with you so that we can have a win-win outcome. And we will continue to eliminate the barriers that impede trade between our two countries. Let me conclude by saying Kenya remains firmly committed to its investors through reforms that ease doing business, strengthen investor protection, accelerate industrialization, and deepen regional integration. We are investing heavily in agriculture, renewable energy, affordable housing, industrial parks, and the digital economy to stand as a globally competitive destination and the gateway to the wider East and Central Africa. And we want to welcome South Africa to build with us this ecosystem. We also recognize the strategic value of closer collaboration among Africa's financial institutions, development finance institutions, pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, and private equity firms in mobilizing long-term capital. Through our National Infrastructure Fund and the Sovereign Wealth Fund, Kenya is unlocking patient capital for infrastructure, energy, logistics, housing, industry, and opening new avenues for partnership with African investors, including those from this great country. We are equally positioning ourselves as a competitive jurisdiction to domicile funds and cross-border investment structuring. In reforms to our financial ecosystem and regulatory framework, Kenya offers fund managers, private equity, venture capital, and institutional investors a gateway to deploy capital efficiently and across the continent. Let me conclude by saying we have today again provided clarity, especially in the areas that was raised by the private sector here, in the areas of standards. Our two standard bodies, we have both CEOs here. We clarified in a subsequent MOU how we are going to have clarity in standardizing the whole system so that we have equity. We have also agreed on how we are going to work with our institutions of higher learning so that again we can deal with the issue of recognition of qualifications, so that again the skills challenge that the gentleman Chate was talking about, we can again align that so that we can have mutual recognition of qualifications, both in Kenya and South Africa. And again, with President Ramaphosa, we did sign off an MOU today to exactly align ourselves around that. And we will continue to identify with your support and with your partnership areas that are still require some fine-tuning so that we can make it easier for all of us to be partners and to create a much more seamless connectivity between our private sector and also all the other things that help us do better business together. With those many remarks, thank you very much. Welcome to Nairobi. We will keep looking at what opportunities are there. Asante sana.